Thanks so much, Lynn, for giving me this opportunity, and thanks everybody for taking the time out to uh, have a bit of insight into what's been happening for this very quiet group. I think they've been very quiet and very busy. An interesting aspect of the pandemic is that many people who have experienced reduced hours of work, working from home, supporting family members at home, lacking time for themselves, and living with hypervigilance have started to see what daily life looks like for unpaid carers. And like a good academic, I need to start with a definition which comes from the Caring Fairly and Mind organisation. When we speak of a carer, we're talking about anyone who looks after a family member, partner or friend who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, mental health or mental ill health, I should say, or addiction and cannot cope without their support. And the care that they give is unpaid. There's an estimated 2.7 million unpaid carers in Australia, and over 240,000 are primary carers to a person with a mental disability. Over 2/3 of carers are women. So what I'd like to do now is to share some findings from a national survey of carers and then extend my comments to some of the issues faced by those caring for people with enduring chronic mental illness, or more accurately, those with a serious brain disease, as they have been a particularly invisible group of carers, and then how these carers can support themselves. From the 21st of April to the 5th of May this year, the Caring Fairly Coalition conducted a national survey to capture unpaid carers' experiences of COVID and to assess the impact on their access to services and supports, health and wellbeing, work and income. The findings draw on 471 completed responses. There was a larger number, but it demonstrates a considerable impact across all the dimensions. And I think the quotations are particularly moving because they do put some, meat and bones on the reality of the statistics. So looking at the access to services and supports, services and time, we have here 60% of carers lost support for the person they cared for. 47% lost support for themselves, 44% spent increased time on unpaid care. So the $1,500 JobKeeper payment per fortnight meant that low paid support staff, for those, for example, whose caree had an NDIS support plan, left work immediately, and the carefully arranged support for carees disappeared almost overnight. And here we have a carer talking about, the extra load that used to be there and all of the new roles that as a carer they had to take on. Looking at the impact on carers' health and wellbeing, it won't be surprising, but it is alarming that 81% of people reported deterioration in their mental health. 88% of carers reported increased stress in their caring role, and for 52%, stress increased a lot or by an extreme amount. And this respondent here, I didn't have 1 second child-free time in 7 weeks up to the survey time. No family, friends or support workers. I can only shower at 11 p.m. when the children finally go to sleep because they can't be left unsupervised, but the shower often wakes them up. So I go for days without showering. I used to go to the gym to keep myself strong, to carry my children and protect myself. I also usually see a psychologist We tried telehealth, but that wasn't appropriate. So in every sense, I am alone. You can really feel the depth of that isolation in that quote. The last slide I want to look at in relation to this survey was the impact on work, income, and the costs of living. So we have 37% lost all or some of their regular income, 37% working fewer hours because of the extra time they had to provide for their caree, 22% worked fewer hours because their employer didn't have enough work, 10% of carers lost their job. Some additional findings in the survey, 71% spending more on the cost of living around meals. We know how much we've all increased our time at the refrigerator and the stove over this period, but also things like extra IT support so that there was some capacity to reach out for those who could afford it, I might say. So we have here, due to coronavirus, my respite carers could not care for the children as they had to isolate. I had to resign from my job. I had no care for the children who are disabled. It's very isolating. I'm unable to sleep as I worry about how I'm going to provide for the children. This is a very common response. Due to being on carers payments, I'm not eligible for the additional supplements. This leaves my single parent family worth $400 worse off per week compared to other single parent families. I've had to delay assessments recommended from my son as I can't afford them. So even though we have heard people through COVID saying they've enjoyed being able to, well, they've been relieved rather than enjoyed being able to hide their poverty because they haven't had to make excuses around not being able to go out. I think we have another, dimension on it there. So we know that this is not sustainable, and it's especially galling for carers to hear repeatedly how much they are valued while they are saving our government over $60 billion in unpaid care. Australia's reliance on unpaid carers is unsustainable and unfair. Many older carers rely on far less savings as a result of their caring. The results of the survey indicate that through COVID, the main focus has been on supporting business, which is important, but carers, I think, have been left as collateral damage. So I'd like to address now for just a brief moment the self-care for somebody caring for a person with enduring mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, or clinical depression. All of the adverse impacts that we've been looking at in relation to COVID have been amplified for them. The established literature on high intelligence predisposing people to psychosocial illness isn't well understood or applied to many of the supports for people with enduring mental illness. With these factors as the daily reality for carers, I think it's important to emphasise why, in most instances, the best interests of a caree with a serious brain disease will be served by you as the carer being around and in the best health you can be. So supporting yourself isn't just about having a break, getting some respite. Their quality of life, indeed their life, may depend on it. I will not mention that really distressing case of the woman in Adelaide, Mary Smith, who was in a home being cared for but still died of really preventable disease and neglect. So supporting yourself, how can you do this and endure, because that's what carers need to do, but also experience joy. Almost each speaker in our wonderful series has talked about staying connected. You can drown in the minutiae of chasing up appointments you thought had been locked in, meds that are not ready, promised data that hasn't been sent, support people that do not turn up. But it requires a lot of intellectual strength, which you must apply to stay connected, to check out occasionally, to let it go, to accept your beautiful friends and family who hear you downloading again, to link with carers that are relevant to the disability that you're caring for. Keeping informed is really important with relevant, helpful, and accurate information. Link up with a relevant carers group, such as the Ballarat Mental Health Carers Circle, which is there to provide friendship, support, resources to help you, even navigating the minefield that is the NDIS plan. Tandem is a superb state-based advocacy group that has links into keynote people in government that are making decisions that will affect us all. The Carer Gateway, a new Commonwealth initiative that is the one-stop shop for Commonwealth support for carers. So linking up with the support group, and we've got some resources on the last slide to support you with that. We talk about being kind to the city, a beautiful campaign that's run through this period from the City of Ballarat and business and community. It's really important to extend that to yourself, carers. Stress responses and traps include snatching sugar-based foods, guilty as charged, on the hoof, rather than eating proper meals, not getting good enough sleep, ignoring your body's cries of fatigue or pain, as you respond to the needs of others to suppress your own needs, but the body keeps the score and we pay the price. Be as dutiful about your own health checks as you are for that of your caree. Make it a mission to ensure you get good sleep, and that might mean locking your bedroom door for a few hours. Humour is your friend, but it is often black. In a recent conversation I had to discuss the nature of some supports, we had a little dance about what can you offer, what do you need, but what are you offering? And when I asked for some clinical education around the disability, I was offered movie tickets because the clinical education was a bit of a difficult question. So, you know, you've got to laugh. Restrict your intake of daily news if it upsets you or your caree, if it distresses you. The COVID story for Australia is very different. It's not nearly as dire as it is for many countries overseas. But if you're caring for somebody who is prone to paranoia, they can catastrophize what's happening there here, and that can be very stressful. So, because we're experiencing something new, many of our services are not ready. Critically, do something beautiful or inspiring regularly, each day if possible. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I spent half my child on a mattress or lying on the grass in the front yard with my brothers and sisters stargazing, and I wonder why I've stopped doing that as an adult. Julia Baird, in her lovely book entitled Phosphorescence, which is derived from that inner light that naturally occurs for magical things like glowworms and creatures of the sea, has some very wise words for us all, I think. How do we continue to glow when the lights turn out? All we can do really is to keep placing one foot on the earth and then the other, to seek out ancient paths and forests, certain in the knowledge that others have endured before us. We must love, and we must look outwards and upwards at all times, caring for others, seeking wonder and stalking awe every day, to find the magic that will sustain us and fuel the light within, our own phosphorescence. Nurture your inner light. I think that's lovely, and the reason that we need to look after ourselves is to nurture that inner light for our advocacy and for the love of our caree or carees. So I have some resources there also. which when the good Denise and I get to work, we'll find out how to load onto the Compassionate Ballarat website. For those with an interest in enduring mental illness, I particularly want to point out the work of Dr. Frances Dark. She's made some real new inroads that I haven't really seen for half a century around the move toward personalised care for the people with enduring mental illness. So thank you, Lynn, and I'm sorry I have gone over my...
Oh, no, that's good. No, that's very good. There's so much material there, and particularly setting it out at the front, identifying what the problem is and then how we move towards addressing it is so important. And there'd be so many people out there who just don't realise the daily journey that being a carer involves. And yes, I certainly take my hat off to everyone who's doing that, because it's done with love, and it's just so important. And as you say, it can often be taken for granted by governments. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to type in the chat box. I was going to start, Mary, by saying that I suppose asking about how governments can get access to the lived experience. We know that the work of the carers is so much heads down, so influencing up to government and changing how systems work is just a huge project, and shouldn't be something that that is left to the carers, but in a way that that lived experience, how do we take it across to the policymakers?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. It's a really important question, because you look at, for example, I think it's in excess of 400 million that the government, with good intention, is putting out for supported housing. And this is one of the key points of suffering for carers with a frail person. Where are they going to be after the decease of themselves, or when they become too frail? And there are a lot of developers in this field, but when you have a conversation with a developer, they are driven by the incentives provided by government. So the response is all about the width of corridors, the height of handrails, rather than for many people, the need for live-in managers to protect them. These people are often very vulnerable financially. They are prone to anyone who'll promise to be their friend giving their valuables away, and they're very lonely and isolated. And so we need a new model of housing, for example, around live-in supports. And there is a group of citizens led by Father Constantine that we heard from last week that is working on a project like this for Ballarat. Last week, I was involved in a Zoom meeting with the Tandem state-based group, and there were two very senior people from the Department of Health and Human Services who were talking about the Carers Victoria, which is a state-based care support for carers in Victoria. And carers were typing in, your websites are unnavigable. They send us around in circles. We have no idea how to get through the barriers to the care you're talking about. And this young man made the comment, we know our systems do this to people, to which I had to type immediately, if we know our systems are doing this to people, why are we not changing our systems? And so your question goes to the very sensible, why are not people with lived experience at the table of government, represented by Tandem, who are talking to carers all the time, at the PHN, the public health networks. We need people not down at the subcommittee, but where those real assumptions and decisions are being made. And then these very large amounts of money given by government with goodwill would actually reach carers. I know with, many of these schemes, less than 10% is actually arriving in the hands of the people for whom the policies develop. So it's a bit tragic, but I think it's simply addressed. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. You have to wonder what it is that stops governments doing that. And I know sometimes the peak bodies can say, well, that's our job to do. But, from some of the research I've done, it's really so important to have that direct connection between the policymaker and the person on whose behalf they are making that policy. So,
Yes.
yes. And yeah, so I can see Naomi saying, thank you, there should be more assistance to navigate services available, not just, a website person, but actually sitting down and taking you through. I know, Mary, that you've done a lot of, and you couldn't be any closer to all this work, and still you are coming across support services that you just weren't aware were there.
Absolutely. And L'Oreal is my dear friend. I think, what hasn't fallen out of my head would be white without L'Oreal. And the point Naomi makes that, it's about a person and, not a website. And I think one of the other issues to flag is that through COVID, we are moving to this telehealth response. For some people, the move to online support is superb, and it's allowing people better quality of time with their families. But for a carer, your energies are depleted. Pardon me. So getting in touch with a relevant support group is really quite critical to navigate that, because the IT response for a person who is isolated and lonely, they don't want that. What they want is to navigate the world with support from a person. But for an able-bodied person, the IT initiatives have been wonderful. And I think, many carers are very impoverished, and we haven't yet developed a response which gives them a very affordable access and free hardware. How about Carer Gateway, Carers Victoria, ensuring that everyone at least has a tablet? That should be not too difficult, but a caree recently said they asked for a tablet, but that was denied to them because they'd already asked for counselling. So this is the kind of thing we really need to overcome.
Yes, just one or the other. Yes, yes. So I notice them saying, how can we set up community database that is updated regularly with support services that are out there for people to access probably?
Yes.
So this sort of community database, I suppose really that's what we're wanting to try and do with Compassionate Ballarat, start to get that, one-stop shop of material and services available.
Yes, yes. So if you have the energy or time, email the Compassionate Ballarat website with your concerns, what it is you're looking for, and we can endeavour to address that. But I think it's a really fair point. In every report I read, it's all about needing to join up what is a very broken and separated system for carers, and in fact for all services for mental health for a whole range of disabilities, because I think we've come from an accounting mindset, a law and accounting mindset, which sadly is still driving much of big initiatives like the NDIS, and people have got very separated KPIs or objectives, and the incentives to work together are not built in, and people who want to achieve this have to do it over and above their work. And so we need some new measures in there to encourage collaborative work and that builds it in as part of everyone's job. We need a bit more 18th century thinking where things were once joined up.
Yeah, and I can see what you're saying. I believe mental health support has become unaffordable for many families. Government should be implementing increased Medicare rebate for people living with mental illness as well as their carers.
Yeah, really, really good point. We are all aware that the public system is very stressed. There are thousands of people within our region that are not able to access mental health treatment. And so I think the tragedy, when you go looking in the private sector, I have come across psychiatrists who are scheduling $500 per hour fees, which I see as a go-away price. People living on disability support pensions are left at the end of a session, $200 and $300 out of pocket. That's really not seeing the person before them, and that means that they're really struggling to tend to their mental health, eat well, or pay their rent. They are choices in a first world country that people shouldn't have to be making.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam just comments that government seems to allocate money and then lose interest in how it's used. And, I think we've all talked about that issue of that transparency of once it's out there to then be looking and seeing that there aren't problems in the implementation. And I think that implementation phase is just so important. We know
really, really critical.
Example of that.
Yeah, no, very true, Lynn. And Sam, I think that's absolutely case. It's sort of, we've made an electoral commitment. We tick the box, and again, the really important half of the box to tick is the monitoring of the implementation and how and what lived experience is represented in there. Because I think governments must be very frustrated issuing these millions of dollars, and then carers are still saying there's not enough. I think we have to strip away quite a bit of the bureaucracy and give this direct to the carers, and a very simple mechanism for how they then justify how they have used that allocation and what for, and how it has supported them. But I don't think we need a big bureaucracy for that. We need a few grandmothers sitting beside policymakers, I think.
Yes, I think that's really important, Mary. Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful presentation and very enlightening. And as much as you said, if people can send in any links that they have for support services, we will certainly be putting them up on our webpage. And I like that idea of wonder and awe. I know Stanford University in the US is now running courses on wonder and awe on the basis that, the research shows that it makes people feel part of something bigger than themselves, and sort of really gives them that larger perspective. And yes, and really that's part of what we're wanting to do in Compassionate Ballarat, bring this understanding through our links to the arts and our creativity, how important that is in guiding our motivations. So thanks again, Mary. And next week, I'll let people know that we're being joined by Dr. Matthew Wallen, who's a senior lecturer in exercise and sports science, who will be speaking with us about the benefits of being physically active at this time, along with some general recommendations for getting back into exercise as things start to open up a bit again. So yes, let's all nurture our inner light, and thank you so much again, Mary. Thank you.
My pleasure, Lynn. Thanks everybody for your hearts and minds and eyes this morning. Thank you. Look forward to next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.